Welcome to The Cynical Developer, the podcast that helps you to improve your development knowledge and career through explaining the latest and greatest in development technology and providing you with what you need to succeed as a developer. In this episode, we're joined by Jeff Nelson, founder and CEO of Cinchapi, based in Atlanta, Georgia in the USA. We'll be discussing Cinchapi and Concourse DB. Jeff wants to deliver computing without complexity. After stops at Planter, MailChimp and Ionic Security, Jeff knew that there had to be a better way for developers to work with data. The Cinchapi data platform builds upon the open source Concourse Database. It adds machine learning to make sense of disparate real-time data, while also including a natural language processing interface to make data conversational and to radically reduce data prep and cleanup. So welcome to the Cynical Developer, Jeff.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
Yeah, not a problem at all. And this is something that I have very little experience in. I'm very much a SQL database developer.
You poor soul.
Yeah, so
poor guy.
So this is a whole world of new for me. So more than playing the dumb podcast host, I will be the dumb podcast host on this one.
Well, I'm happy to break it down and demystify all this great stuff we're doing.
Sure. So we'll kick it off straight away with Cinchapi. That's your business at the moment. What exactly is Cinchapi and what do you do?
So Cinchapi is all about giving meaning to the world's data. So that's very grandiose and broad and big. And so I'll talk specifically about the problem that we're trying to solve. So data is an enabler of solutions for many of the world's most challenging problems. If you look at problems in the financial sector, such as fraud, right? How can we understand fraud, how those patterns evolve, and how can we combat it? Or cybersecurity, that's a really big topic everywhere around the world. Or in places like education or healthcare, a lot of these problems are data problems at the root, right? It's really about being able to collect the right data, understand that data, and then act on that data very quickly. And the challenge is data is growing, and it's not only growing in vast amounts, but it's growing quickly. The new buzzword that we've evolved from big data to real-time data. So what Cinchapi is all about is building tools to handle data in the face of this new reality. Tools that are real-time, tools that are easy to use, and tools that augment human intelligence with machines and machine learning to make it more efficient and more productive.
Okay, so it's coming in and it's being intelligent about what you do, and it learns what you do with your data. Bit like Big Brother is watching you a little bit more.
Well, that's an interesting analogy because I've worked my entire career in data. I started my career working at Palantir, and Palantir it still calls itself a startup, but they've been around for 10 years and it is one of the most valuable private companies out there. But even at Palantir, the joke was, hey, this is big data. Everyone's looking at your data. And the truth of the matter is, I do want to state that I'm not interested in looking at anyone's data. What I'm interested in is allowing people that have data to be able to understand their own data, right? I don't need to understand it, but businesses and governments and organizations and nonprofits, those that have data that can, solve problems with that data. Right now, it's very hard for them to even figure out what they can do with it. An interesting analogy I always give people, and it's not even really an analogy, but the reality that I often tell people when I talk to them about what we're doing at Cinchapi is that, the question is, well, what is it that people want to do with data? And I often say people don't even know what they want to do because they don't even know what data they have. There's the problem there. They don't even know what they're collecting. And so the first step of the problem and the solution we're providing is to make it easy for people to discover data. And so I'll break it down, because with databases and data, it very quickly can get very granular and nuanced, and you kind of lose people. So we try to simplify this as much as possible. And with Cinchapi, our workflow is only 3 steps. The first step is ask, the second step is see, and the third step is act. So ask, see, and act. 3 steps, right? And so what that means is with Cinchapi, the way you work with data is you ask questions. So you mentioned you're a SQL guy. I happen to not really like SQL, but with Cinchapi, you don't have to decide, well, am I going to use a structured query language or am I going to use some JSON-based query language? You can use natural language. So we present a conversational interface to people working with data so they can literally have a conversation with their data. They can ask questions, they can get results, and they can ask follow-up questions about their results, right? It's like having a data scientist at your disposal 24/7. So that's the first step, asking questions about your data. The second step is being able to see data. So we generate visualizations on the fly in real time for your data. And these visualizations will automatically update as your data updates. But you can also go back in time and see how data looked in the past and how different trends and patterns emerged over time, right? So you get this 360 view that in many ways, this three-dimensional view because of the time element view of your data. So you're not just getting results back to your questions, but you're actually able to see those and see a story of how those results developed. And then finally is the act portion of the workflow. You can automate any workflows with your data. So if you have interesting insights you're getting from the platform and you want to do something with that, with the click of a button, you can automate a workflow. Or we can generate code snippets for you to put in your application on the fly, right? So it's a really easy way for people to take data from any sources, put them in Cinchapi, ask questions and do cool things with the data.
Sure. So you're giving this natural language to people to access their data. Is that through your product? Is that what Cinchapi, that's what you do? And all of that's on top of Concourse Database, or is that part of Concourse?
So that's a great question. So Concourse Database, it's an open source database, and you can go check that out now. It's concoursedb.com. Concourse is the heart of the Cinchapi platform. Now, to specifically answer your question, the natural language processing sits on top of Concourse. So Concourse has very limited natural language translation capabilities built into it. And what we've done with Cinchapi is we've extended that with a full suite of natural language processing. And it's really cool how we've done it because it's contextual natural language processing and natural language translation that you don't have to explicitly train. And that's some of the secret sauce, how we're able to contextually take, abstract questions about data, such as, let's say that you are a bank, right? And you're interested in financial fraud. So you can ask a question like, which accounts have looked suspicious in the last 30 days? That could mean anything, right? But we're able to contextually translate that into something that's relevant and actionable for your organization, as opposed to some other organization. Maybe they're not in financial fraud, but maybe they're a gaming company and they're trying to investigate, financial gaming, fraudulent gaming accounts. And so what that question means for them contextually is different to a bank. But what we've done with the Cinchapi platform is we're able to contextually translate those queries in relevant and actionable ways without the user having to go in and explicitly train the system to do so. So that's really cool. So that's kind of where the separation between the open source Concourse database and the rest of the Cinchapi platform is. The natural language translation is one component, and the other two components are the visualizations that I spoke of, being able to get those visualizations on the fly and have those updated in real time. That's the other piece of it. And the third part is that automation workflow, the being able to automate any workflows on the fly and on demand is what else Cinchapi provides on top of Concourse.
Nice. That's some really impressive stuff that's going on there. And if you don't have to train it, I've worked a little bit with machine learning, and you have to send it loads of data for it to understand and sort of work it out for itself, and then you can use it. But if you're not training it, how does it understand what its context is? Is that something that you guys do in the background for specific clients?
So it's a great question, and without revealing too much of the secret sauce, the way I'll answer this is I'll kind of start with when I talk to a lot of people about what we're doing, they say, "Oh, that sounds great. So what are you using behind it? Are you using Postgres or Mongo, or what are you using?" And I say, "No, we built a database. We built Concourse. We built our own database to support this. And they'll say, well, why'd you do that? Why not just, everything you're saying about the natural language and the visualizations, that sounds great, but why not put it on top of, SQL or MySQL or Mongo? And the reason we built our own database is because that's the key to allowing us to do these cool things in cool ways, right? So being able to contextually translate natural language and do machine learning without having to be explicitly trained up front. Concourse allows us to do that. Concourse provides some very nice hooks to the rest of the Cinchapi platform that makes it very, very easy. So to detail that a little more, the way we're able to do a lot of these things is because, with most machine learning, you've got to give it data to make it smart. Well, the database itself has all this data, right? So it's got all this data and it's got all this rich context already that's just being stored by virtue of the fact that it's a database. So we can leverage that very easily to create some baseline context. And then we do some cool things around that with some proprietary data sets that we've developed, as well as some public data sets. And then in addition with, in conjunction with working with specific clients and understanding their particular use cases, all that comes together to create this rich ecosystem of context that the system just has and is able to leverage to answer questions and provide data, but also provide other insights about that data on the fly.
Yeah, that's it's good. It is really, as I said before, really impressive the way that works. We've obviously touched on quite a lot there, the Concourse Database. And I think we've outlined a little bit of what it is. Concourse is an operational database. Now, can you explain to myself and to our listeners what the difference is between an operational database and what some of us are going to be used to as a normal SQL database?
Absolutely. So an operational database is kind of a fancy way of saying a database you can trust. And so for those who are well versed in databases, this is my opportunity to show them, to show some credibility, and I'll use the correct terminology. And Concourse, so there are essentially two classes of databases. One is OLTP, which is online transaction processing, and the other is OLAP, which is online analytics processing. And the difference there are many subtle differences, but the way people use those is, an OLTP database, that's for data that you can't lose. It has to be correct, and you've got to be able to trust it. And for Cinchapi, we think of that as definitive data. So that's data that is strongly consistent. It's a strongly consistent database. And, we use ACID transactions to make sure that if I store something in the database, when I go back to the database is promising me it's going to be there and I can trust it. That's an operational database, as opposed to an analytics database, which is one where, this is a copy of data that you've got somewhere else, but you're going to put it in this analytics database, but you're going to store it in a special way so that you can do lots of ad hoc queries and analytics on it very efficiently. So that's sort of the difference there, where you have kind of these operational or transactional databases and these versus these analytics databases. Now, Concourse actually happens to be one of the few databases that's OLTAP, so it's OLTAP. It's both a transactional and analytics processing database, but we refer to it as an operational database because what we want to emphasize relative to a lot of the products with which we compete, like Tableau or Elasticsearch, is that you can actually store data in this system and trust that it's going to be there. And you can actually use this as a system of record. So, great systems like Elasticsearch and Tableau, which I mentioned, even MongoDB, those are systems that, they can lose your data, right? Or they can sometimes give you the wrong answer if you go to the database and ask a question. And that may not seem like a big deal, but for, many organizations and big companies and enterprises, they need to be able to trust their data. They're building applications that, can save or lose millions or billions of dollars, that can save or lose lives, that can really impact people in very real ways. So the database is in many ways both the first and last line of defense. They've got to be able to trust what goes into it and what comes out of it. And Concourse adheres to that principle. So that's why we call it an operational database. And in talking to customers as we were building this out, that's something that was very important, was to have a system where I could collect data and store it and trust it, but also analyze it and then take action with that data, all in sort of one system in one place.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that there was the potential for the likes of Elasticsearch and Tableau to actually lose the data that you're putting into it. But I guess that Concourse persists that information somewhere for you, so that it's always available.
Yeah, so and I love talking about this stuff, so I'm really restraining myself from getting too deep into the technical woods. But the technical reason, it's really physics. So Eric Brewer, who is a professor, I believe still at UC Berkeley, has this theorem called the CAP theorem. And many people have interpreted it in ways that aren't necessarily true. But what the CAP theorem essentially says, the CAP stands for consistency, availability, and partition tolerance. Most people don't really understand what those words mean. I like to think of the CAP theorem in terms of R cubed, 3 R's, which is responsiveness, reliability, and reachability, right? So the C, consistency, is how reliable is the system. The reachability is what the A is, availability. Can you actually reach this? Can you actually reach the system? I'm sorry, reachability is the partition tolerance. Is there a failure, right? And responsiveness is the A, availability, which is, can you actually get a response from the system, right? So you can reach it, but sometimes you don't get a response. So that's how I like to think about the CAP theorem, which talks about distributed systems. And so the reason systems like Elasticsearch can lose data is because what they prioritize, what the CAP theorem says, is because of physics, essentially, in any distributed system, failure is a reality. And so because failure is a reality, you can't at the same time both guarantee that you can get a reliable response from a system where arbitrary failure can occur. That doesn't mean it can never happen. It just means that if the system is experiencing failure internally, which means that certain parts of the system can't talk to one another, you can't both guarantee the reliability of the data and also get a response. And that kind of makes sense intuitively if you think about, I'm married. I've been married now for 2 years, and I've also got 2 kids. And usually, my son, he's 8. When he wants something and he will ask me for it, I'll say, well, I have to check with your mom, right? Because my wife really runs the show. And so if you think about it, if I, let's say that he's asking a question like, hey, do I have a basketball game on Saturday? And of course, dad doesn't know, right? So if I can't reach my wife, I can't guarantee that my answer is reliable if I give him an answer. Or if I don't want to run the risk of giving him an incorrect answer, then my responsiveness is going to be slow because I can't reach my wife, so I can't respond to the question, right? And so, that's kind of an example that kind of makes you understand distributed systems and distributed databases. So systems like Elasticsearch, what they prioritize is responding, even if their response is wrong, right? They're gonna tell my son, no, you don't have a basketball game because I don't feel like getting up on Saturday morning and taking you. So they're gonna respond, and the answer could potentially be wrong. Whereas Concourse, we prioritize reliability of the data and correctness and consistency, which allows us to be classified as an operational database, because when Concourse responds, you can trust the results.
Sure. So your response time may be a little bit slower at times, but your data is going to be the right data.
Absolutely. And of course, no one would ever market and say, well, our response time may be slow. So I don't like to think of it in that way. It is true, right? With some of these systems that are not operational databases, you can, if just the naive approach to it, you can get, faster responses. But we've actually done a lot of interesting work with Concourse in terms of how we store data and a lot of the internal processing that allows us to be both a strongly consistent operational database, but also have response times for queries that are on par with systems like Elasticsearch and Mongo and Tableau. So we're not slower than those products, generally speaking, because we put a lot of thought and effort and engineering into making sure that wasn't a huge trade-off that people had to make.
Sure. So we talked about a couple of things that make Concourse sort of stand out against some of its competitors. Were they the drivers behind making you want to build Concourse?
In many ways, yes. So it started out as I mentioned previously, and you also mentioned in the intro. I've worked at a number of great companies, starting my career at Palantir Technologies, working in data, and then continuing on working in data throughout my career. And I've been on both sides. I've been a developer that's trying to build data platforms, and I've also been working with customers, big companies that are trying to do things with those data platforms. And I've been frustrated as a developer trying to build those platforms or build stuff with those platforms. And I've seen, my counterparts at these big companies grow frustrated with trying to use those tools as well. And it really comes down to a couple of reasons. I think the primary reason is that typically, very, very smart people and people that build databases and data platforms, they're typically really, really smart. When they build software, they assume that other people are also really, really smart. And so what they do is they build software that they understand and they can easily use, but then they put it in the hands of people that, aren't as smart in the same ways that they are smart. And it's hard and it's challenging and it's frustrating. So that's one of the reasons. The second reason that, I was frustrated and my counterparts were frustrated was because the way that data exists today in 2017 is very different than it was in, the 1970s when relational databases really became mainstream, right? When like the Oracles of the world, when they were really developed, right? The variety of data, the velocity of data, and the unpredictability of data is very different today than it was 30 or 40 years ago. And so you've got these tools that really aren't user-friendly and also were built for a reality of data that isn't true today. And so I saw that frustration and it bothered me because one of the driving forces behind, my entire being as an engineer and in many ways as a person is this obsession with eliminating complexity. My vision is computing without complexity. I want to make tools that just work. Right. It's Cinchapi. One of our sort of goals and mottos is that everything we do must be done with OPP. And for us, that means open and press play. Right. It's the OPP principle. And if we build something where you can't just open it and press play, right, you download it and it just runs. Right. You can configure it and customize it, but there has to be a set of reasonable defaults that someone can just take it and use it. And it generally works well. That's how we want to build software. And we saw that, other people specifically in the data space weren't thinking about building tools in that way. And also they weren't in many ways because they couldn't build new tools or refactor their legacy tools to really handle data in the way that the current reality demands. And so that was the motivation behind building Concourse and the rest of the Cinchapi platform. It was really about how can we build something that's one much easier to use, but since we're building this thing from scratch anyway, how can we really rethink data and data management in a new, novel, and holistic way that just makes it much more appropriate for real-time data and big data and being able to have operational data that, can also have ad hoc analytics done on demand. And so that was the motivation there.
Yeah, and it's unlike some of the others, it's open source as well. So it's on GitHub, and if you're so inclined, you can actually go on and download the source and have a play with it, even add to it, I guess, and and make it better in your own eyes, or do something that it doesn't quite do?
Absolutely. It is open source. Our GitHub account, we're on GitHub, and our name on GitHub and Twitter and Facebook, everywhere, is just Cinchapi. So that's spelled Cinchapi. And that gives me a good excuse to talk about the genesis of the name. Many people wonder where it comes from. It comes from combining the word cinch, which means easy, and API, right? So easy APIs. So everything I just said about ease of use is right there in the name Cinchapi. And so you can go to github.com/Cinchapi and take a look at Concourse, take a look at the source code. You can contribute to it. We welcome contributors, whether you are a database expert or whether you know nothing about databases. We want as many people as possible to contribute and make this better, because that's really the path forward for us in making this a predominant technology for IoT data and real-time data as the industry is shifting in those directions.
Yeah, sure. I was going to ask where Cinchapi came from, but that is quite good. I like that Cinch API, the easy API, easy by name, easy by nature.
There's our new tagline right there.
I'll put the invoice in the post.
I was gonna say I should trademark that before you get a chance to, but no, that's nice. I like that. Easy by name, easy by nature.
Yeah. So we've already covered some of the impressive features that Concourse has. It also claims on the website about automatic indexing, version control, and self-tuning. Can you explain or tell me about those three aspects of the system?
Absolutely. So, as a developer, the reason I don't like SQL is, well, just one, because I don't like SQL. That's a reason in and of itself. But relational databases in general, I don't like schemas. I'm not a huge fan of schemas. I don't like the database forcing me to tell the database what data I'm going to store and how I want to use it. That's precisely what a schema is. And if you think about it, as I was mentioning before, how the oracles of the world, in the 1970s or 1960s or whenever they were created, disk space was minimal. The amount of memory, RAM, memory that you had available, it was small. So the database needed you to tell it exactly what to do, so that if it didn't do the right thing, you were to blame for it. And I just don't like that model in 2017. We've got, disk space is cheap. We've got more memory now than anyone who would have ever imagined even 10 years ago. That's just, accessible to anyone. And so we had to rethink the database with that reality in mind. It's no longer a need for you to tell the database specifically what to do if the database could figure it out on its own. And specifically because the database could, in many ways, be much smarter than many developers when it comes to tuning a database, because it could just do the right thing, right? It's kind of like self-driving cars. Self-driving cars can be safer than humans because they've got eyes in places that humans don't, and they don't go to sleep or get tired, whereas humans do, right? So it's kind of a similar concept with the database and the self-tuning component of it. So it all originates from this not wanting to have schemas. And so what we wanted was a database system where you could just throw any data at the system at any scale and do any queries, and it would be efficient and it would work. And so if we weren't going to require a schema, in order for us to make that work, that meant that we had to automatically index the data, and we had to do it in intelligent ways and use some machine learning so that you didn't pay the penalty for the database not having a schema, right? The database wasn't going to require that, but the database was going to be able to figure all these things out on its own. And so that's where the automatic indexing comes in. When you put data in Concourse, we automatically index it in very efficient ways. So you can do ad hoc queries. So you can do, full text searches like, Elasticsearch style queries on your data. And you can do any analytics. we automatically do that indexing no matter what data you store. And what's really nice about it is we do it in such a way where we don't slow down your writes. So it doesn't cause writing to the database to be any slower than it otherwise would have been, because we've done some fantastic engineering to make it so that you can have very fast writes, but also have this automatic indexing that happens. And similar to that, because we're automatically indexing everything, and by virtue of the storage system that we've created, it was very easy for us to put in version control into the database. And version control is really cool, but it's also for developers a very nice. It's the feature that once you have it, you're gonna wonder how you ever lived without it. And so, what version control in Concourse means is that when data changes, you can always go back in time. And when I say go back in time, of course, I mean you can revert. You can say, hey, this data changed, but I actually want to revert it to the state that it was yesterday. You can easily do that. So you can, you've got backups for free and you can revert to previous states without downtime, but that's not all it's built for. It's also a first-class feature of the database. And so you can actually issue queries for data in the past. And that doesn't just mean that you can retrieve what data looked like in the past. You can do more than just say, hey, give me this particular record from last week. You can actually issue ad hoc queries against previous states of the database. So you can, for instance, one that, whose favorite color was red 2 weeks ago, right? So you're issuing an ad hoc range query, ad hoc query. You can also do ad hoc range queries against previous states of the database. And it's very fast because version control is a first-class component of the system. And so what that allows developers to do, it makes debugging extremely easy because you never have to worry about if something went wrong in your code and something changes in the database. Even in production, you can always see what happened in the past. You can always go back to previous states. But it also allows developers to do really cool things like build features that take advantage of how data looked in the past. So it gives you this extra dimension of intelligence about your users, about your products, about the accounts in your system, just about all your data that you can use to come up with new and novel algorithms and novel features that was very, very hard to do before. No one was providing it out of the box at that scale before Concourse decided to do it.
It's something I could have done with in the past. When you're up at 3-4 a.m. and you got a release going out tomorrow night, and you try to update your schema, and you screw the database up, and you've had 3 months of temps manually inputting data into the database that you forgot to back up first, and you didn't run anything in a transaction. I'm not saying I've ever been there and done that, but
you get it.
Yeah,
you get it. And it's fascinating because we've all been there. I've got countless stories like that as well. But the two things you just mentioned, schemas get you in trouble. So we're schemaless, so you don't have to worry about that. And if somehow you do get into trouble, version control is just it's gonna allow you to easily roll back or figure out what things look like in the past, so you can restore it if necessary.
Yeah, and with that version control, there's no need for audit logs or anything like that at all, because it's already there for you, and you can just query the previous state of the data.
We actually have an audit function in the database built into it, so you could just say audit, and it shows you the audit log, like it just produces it.
Nice. It's very good when you can get the software and the systems that you're working with to do your job for you. But we're in danger of coming up with too many solutions that make us obsolete.
Yeah, we're going to be out of a job soon, huh?
Well, they always say that the developer and the software programmer are going to be the last jobs available. But if guys like yourself carry on, then I'm not too sure about that.
Someone will need to be able to herd the robots, right?
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to sort of lead teams of people and go out and shoot the robots when Skynet falls. So
exactly,
there's always that to look forward to.
Absolutely.
We mentioned a few different industries and that Concourse are being used in. Is there anything or any application that you would say, if I was considering to build it, that Concourse was definitely the route to go in? or is it just one of those, it depends?
So the industries that we've really focused on, I've mentioned financial, specifically the fraud use case. We focused a lot on that. Cybersecurity, and the version control is really cool there because a big component of understanding fraud and cyber threats and intrusion detection is being able to look at how things were in the past and how they developed over time. So those are definitely industries that are ripe for Concourse and the Cinchapi platform. Another is just any kind of social network or marketing, any industries where, and this is true of retail as well, where there's a premium on being able to understand the connections, products, places, things, so social networks or e-commerce or marketing. And the reason Concourse is a good fit for that, which is another feature, it probably sounds like this is Christmas morning and I'm Santa Claus just pulling gifts out. But another aspect of Concourse that is really cool is that it is also a graph database. It's technically a document graph database. So if you think of combining like MongoDB with Neo4j, that's our data model. So, and if you combine this notion of a graph, right? So being able to see connections among people or in places and things and objects, and you combine that with version control, there's this really cool ability to not only see connections or degrees of separation in a network, but also to see how that develops and changes over time. And that's really fascinating. And in fact, in Cinchapi, and you can actually, when you have the full platform and you're looking at visualizations, one of those visualizations is actually a network graph where you can see how different, data points within your system were connected to each other and how they got to be connected and how those connections have changed over time. So that's really powerful for social networks and marketing and e-commerce and retail as well. So those are, some of the industries that we've been looking at, and we've really got great reception from with what we're doing.
Cool. Concourse is an open source project, and Cinchapi is your sort of paid for service on top of that. So when it comes down to commercial and personal setup and use, does Cinchapi offer anything for the personal developer, or is it really aimed at commercial bodies?
So we do. So we offer the Cinchapi platform as a hosted version in the cloud. So, like any SaaS application where you can go and sign up and create an account, we offer that version. So for personal developers that are interested in that option, that is available. For big enterprises, we also have an on-premise version where you can actually take the Cinchapi data platform, put it in your data centers and host it on your servers. So you can make sure that, we never see your data, never touch it, never have any access to it. So those are the two ways that you can use it. So certainly for personal developers, the hosted version is a viable solution there.
And we can find out all about that on the Cinchapi website as well.
Absolutely. www.cinchapi.com.
Cool. All the links and that we've mentioned in the show will be in the show notes as well. So for any listeners that are quickly trying to scribble down these domains, don't worry about it too much. They will be in the notes. So we've also said that you can get Concourse from GitHub already. So that's nice and easy, isn't it, and accessible. And that is the OPP. Download it, install it, and away we go. We're running
Absolutely.
with it. It's fantastic. So what's the future hold for Concourse? It's a relatively new player to the market. What's coming up?
So 2017 is going to be a fantastic year for Cinchapi and Concourse. What we're focused on is commercializing the platform that we've built. So, we've spent a lot of time building what I think is just a great data platform that's easy to use, but also provides functionality in novel ways that's never been done before. And so the next step is to commercialize that, to put that on real world problems that are hard and challenging, but very important. And so that's what we're focused on. And the hope is that, when you're building a database, it really takes like 7 to 10 years before people trust the database to use it. You take MongoDB. MongoDB, maybe 2 years ago, it was really when enterprises really started to look at it and say, okay, we could probably use this for some of our applications. And so we have no illusions that people are going to say, oh, there's this Concourse database. I just downloaded it from GitHub. Let's put every customer's bank records on this thing and hope for the best. We have no illusions about that. So the way that we're focused on commercialization, but also maturing Concourse and the underlying technologies, is to work with different companies to say, hey, okay, you've got your data in Oracle, and that's great. Keep it in Oracle, but connect it to Concourse and the Cinchapi platform as a warehouse and take advantage of all the features like the natural language querying, the visualizations on the fly, the real-time automation of workflows that are very hard to do on your own, or Oracle doesn't really provide out of the box for cheap. Use Cinchapi to power those things, right? So your data stays in Oracle, right? That's still your system of record, but use our platform to really see different dimensions of the data and power some new workflows. And that's going to continue to give us feedback on the platform. It's going to allow us to mature it and harden it for production real world use cases. But more importantly, it's going to allow us to gain the trust of these big companies. And, down the line, as they're starting to build out new platforms or decommission legacy systems and transition them over to new technologies, they're going to remember Cinchapi and Concourse and how easy it is to use and how, intelligent it is and how much insight is delivered, and will be a viable contender to be, a system of record in these companies going forward.
Yeah, so it's going to be a case of remember where you heard about it first, and it was
Exactly.
on this podcast.
Absolutely.
Cool. If I wanted to sort of find out some more about Concourse and Cinchapi, I wanted to maybe take a course or some tutorials or anything like that. Are there any training courses, any videos or anything that you guys have put together?
Absolutely. So we, on our YouTube channel, which is also just Cinchapi, Cinchapi, we've got tutorials and training videos on our YouTube channel. You can also find those on our website. Once you go to the GitHub repo, you'll see all the links for the community, our mailing list, the Slack channel. We don't have, formal trainings yet. That's going to be something we add in 2017, kind of having meetups and formal trainings. But we've got a great community of developers that are eager to help people. So if you're interested or have questions, you can contact us in various ways, and someone will be more than happy to assist.
That's awesome. It sounds like you got your work cut out for you over the next 12 months, but it's going to be a very busy but very productive year, hopefully, for you.
I hope so.
Yeah, we're just about out of time, so I'd like to thank you for coming on and explaining what Concourse is to me. Opened my eyes up to something new, which is fantastic. And maybe I'll go and have a play with it. I don't know what I'd use it for just yet, but it definitely seems like something that I should have a play around with. Absolutely.
I look forward to you doing so. And if you have any questions about it, please reach out.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a bit of a Slack monkey, so I might have to try and find your Slack channel as well.
Cool. Sounds good.
So thanks for listening to The Cynical Developer. I'm James Stoddart. You've been listening to Jeff Nelson talking about Cinchapi and Concourse Database. Until next time, thanks. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on your favourite podcast platform and help The Cynical Developer to grow by increasing its audience. If you have any questions about this or any other episode, then drop us an email, a tweet, or leave a comment on the website, where you can find all the resource links and show notes for each episode.